I want to give a shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. This is Secret Project number 3 by Brandon Sanderson, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So, this book has got to be 2 stars for me out of 5. I just didn't like it very much. I had a lot of promise going into this one. I think I predicted that I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked the first 𝐒𝐿Z𝐼 book out of these 4 secret projects, 𝐻𝐻 of the Emerald Sea. I didn't much care for the second one, which was not a 𝐒𝐿Z𝐼 book, and I thought we'd be back to that greatness that I thought 𝐻𝐻 of the Emerald Sea was, but it's just not there. And this is a big shocker to almost all of you, because I do this TBR contest every month where people guess the ratings that I'm going to give for each book, and there was like 185 or so people this month, and only 3 people got this one right. So yeah, big shocker to everybody, including me. And yeah, this book is just not written for me. I'm sad about this. While I remain a big Sanderson fan, even after this, this marks 3 out of the 4 last books that I've not really enjoyed that much. I hated The Lost Metal, for a lot of reasons. I really liked 𝐻𝐻 of the Emerald Sea. I didn't really much care for the Wizard's Handbook and then like 15 Other Words, which is a crazy title. I talked about that in my video, and then I didn't like really this one. So yeah, that's a lot of misses from Brandon Sanderson for me, who's up until recently been so consistently great. And before people jump out and call this review rage bait, which I've noticed is a term that gets flung around a lot when I review a new book, a new popular book, and give it a negative review, especially when so many other people give it positive reviews. I just hope you know that I lose subscribers when I talk negatively about major author books, especially Sanderson. I lose a decent amount of subscribers, and it would be very much in my best interest to claim that I loved this book, but I have to be honest with myself here and just say what my honest thoughts are. But I'm going to try to explain why I didn't like this, because I think a lot of people that are going to watch this, they're going to hear what I have to say, and they're going to say, oh, that actually seems interesting to me. I'm actually going to like that. But there may be some others on the other side of ultimately how I felt on this. So really, at the end of the day, this felt like an anime in novel form, with like these heavy Japanese or Korean influences that I've just never really cared for. And I never have at any point in my life. And I find that over time that I like that even less and less over time. So to get that here, I did not like it. It honestly felt like I was playing a Final Fantasy game, but reading it. And I've never really thought Final Fantasy games have had, great stories. I've played them because I get kind of addicted to the gameplay loops, but the stories are just so blah to me. And that's what this was here. It's just not my jam. And not only that, I thought the plot was extremely slow for major portions of this book. It involved a very stale romance story, which I never care for, never care for. And I don't particularly enjoy the narrator of this story's voice here, 𝐒𝐻𝐿, especially compared to 𝐻𝐻 of the Emerald Sea, where I thought his voice lended nicely to the tone of that story. 𝐒𝐻𝐿 is this narrator who is present in every 𝐒𝐿Z𝐼 book. And in these secret novels, he's been narrating both the 𝐒𝐿Z𝐼 ones now. But he's this lighthearted sort of character. And in 𝐻𝐻 of the Emerald Sea, which has this, bright, kind of glowing, fun, whimsical feel to it, it worked really well. But in this dark book, it felt very out of place for me. I did enjoy the beginning of this story and the very end of the story. But I didn't love them enough to really save this story for me throughout. The basic premise of the story is that you've got this character, the Nightmare Painter, and this guy's job is to capture nightmares that escape into the city to feed on the fear of the people, and then to trap them again, he has to paint them, which is cool, very unique, magic sort of system, but that's always how it is with Sanderson. But he is having to get, I think, a bit more unique over time because he's done so much, and you have things like Mistborn, you have things like Stormlight. These characters have kind of almost classic superpowers. Mistborn had a little more unique, but Stormlight certainly is, feels like, oh, this character can fly. Oh, this character can do X, Y, and Z that you've read about 100 times. I love those stories, but these have to get very more unique because otherwise it's just going to be kind of the same thing, retread all the time. So outside of this character, the Nightmare Painter, you have living in an entirely different place, like a different world, is Yumi. Yumi's this priestess, and she's able to summon and command spirits using this. It sounds dumb, but it kind of works in the story. This like stacking blocks in a very unique way. And as she does this, she's able to like command spirits up to help inhabitants of different areas perform various functions in life. So she'll travel to a town, do this like ritual, and apply these spirits to like a farmer and allow the farmer to like, glide over his fields so he doesn't like tramp on any of them, for example, and stuff like that. Basic things that improve their life. They're not like major superpowers, but it helps them, get along. Getting to know these characters was fun. But without spoiling too much of anything of value of the story and keeping things very, very vague, the crux of this story hits very early on when these characters end up tied to each other's worlds somehow, and if they have to kind of figure out why they're there, how to fix things, but it turns sadly for me into a very predictable romance novel. And I mentioned it before, but romance novels aren't my jam. They never have been. I suspect they never will be. Maybe they will. Maybe this will be like Matt's, romance book reviews at some point as I, get older, and maybe that'll be my thing. I don't think so, but maybe it will. So, not casting any aspersions on that. I love when people love books, but that's not what I love in my stories. This left me very frustrated as a reader for major portions of the story. Because you had this, what I thought of as like a beautiful, beautiful world. And the setup gets ruined fairly quickly. And I almost all of my willpower got sucked out of wanting to finish this story, especially when I'm reading another story that I took a break to read this one, the third book in the Dandelion Dynasty. And I just love these stories. And I kept thinking as I'm reading this, like, I could just be reading, Dandelion Dynasty right now. I could be reading the Veiled Throne. But I'm reading this, and that sucked. And so I just kept like waiting for classic Sanderson to show back up again, which didn't really ever happen till the end of the story. Outside of this, I've never been a huge fan of the character work that Sanderson lays down, with some major exceptions for people like Dalinar from Stormlight. And this book basically is a character book, and I don't think Sanderson can, thrive as a writer, writing like, is the crux of what makes this story good or bad. And this sounds like a really negative thing, but I think almost every author out there has, strengths and weaknesses. I don't think there's anybody out there where it's like, oh, they are just perfect, outside of like Steven Erikson for me. But I think the weakness of Sanderson is the way he writes his characters and his prose, but I can forgive that a lot. But this book, it had several characters, but that I feel like I've read before, and like a love interest that I feel like I've read before, and it felt like a bit copy pasted here. Obviously not exact because there are differences here. They're different people. They're from different worlds. They act a little bit differently, but I just feel like I've read these characters before, in the way that they're written, and that's not awesome. So I never really connected with these characters. Again, I never connected with the other characters, that felt kind of mimicked here. The writing style. Is not just Sanderson here, but 𝐒𝐲𝐷, who I mentioned earlier. It's constantly trying to make the reader laugh in this kind of dark world. And I know this makes me sound kind of hypocritical because I do enjoy oftentimes this balance, right? Of, you have this dark and you need this light to go along with it. But to have this ever-present, light-hearted narrator, it just kind of wrecked the humor and the tone of this story for me. This certainly feels like the most different Sanderson book that I've ever read. So many of his books feel very, very much the same thing. And this just felt like out of left field. I've got primarily a love interest here, and we got that with like kind of like Elantris. But this feels like this Japanese story. And like, no offense to the Japanese stories. I would love if I was a big fan of those stories. I'm not, though. And if you are, more power to you. I would love to love the same kind of things that you love and things in general. But but yeah, that's, you're in that boat, and I wish I was with you, but I'm not. Outside of this book, taking a little bit of like the, 10,000 feet view, I just remained a little frustrated in general with this whole secret project thing. And I get that that's not just like this book, but I want to, stand on my soapbox and say this. But I should have known better. I got caught up in the hype, I think. I got sucked into this idea that we were going to get these 4 new novels that were going to be the same quality, length, and scope of the traditional Sanderson novels that I have come to love. But what I got was 4 shorter novels. I'm assuming the 4th one will be similar to the first 3. That when totaled, I haven't done the math here, or the word count total, but it's probably going to be like a little bit longer than a single Stormlight book. And none of them are even close to the same quality. And I recognize that I did say Crest of the Emerald Sea was a 5, but it's not to that same quality that I come to expect from Stormlight. The things that I love about Sanderson cannot possibly exist in this shorter format, on these standalone formats. I love his sprawling worlds. I love these tons of characters being introduced. I love these epic plot lines that slowly emerge over time. I love these massive, massive twists that I think Sanderson is, like a god at. That are more intense due to like the huge volume of groundwork that's being laid for like hundreds, if not thousands of pages beforehand. This painstakingly detailed outlining that makes the stories feel, very fresh, like well connected, and like wonderful from start to finish. And essentially, I just want to get back to the epicness of Stormlight and Mistborn Era 1. And I can't wait to enjoy that type of Sanderson book again. And I'm just not getting those things from these stories, especially number 2, and even more so, especially number 3. So, in summary, didn't love it, didn't like it, but I think that you probably will. And that's not because I think this is low quality and, I'm on some higher plane than you. That's not how it is. I'm probably on a lower plane. Or if there's a thing such as planes, I don't want to like view myself like that, but most people are going to like this. Not only do I think that a lot of people are going to enjoy the Japanese kind of feel to this, but there is a lot of hype that goes into an author like Sanderson that it is hard to remove yourself from. And that's a good thing. I don't mean that as a negative thing. Because hype is good, right? Like, it's fun, especially when it gets rewarded. And I've been there. Before I did reviews, before I was reading, over 100 books a year, and I hadn't read enough to really, make me a little bit more detached from the hype. And I try so hard to detach myself from it. I put a lot of conscious effort into it. But it is fun to just be excited about a book coming out and getting that kind of Harry Potter feel to it. I wasn't in that, but I saw it happen, that hype. You're standing in line here, you're waiting for that clock to get to midnight, you're downloading the book, and it's just going to add more fun and excitement to it. And so, yeah, you're probably going to like this one. You're probably going to love this one. And yeah, I hope that is the case, but just sadly, not for me. So I am going to wrap things up there. Thank you so much for watching this, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Jen B, Harry B, Jamie, Jeff Pixler, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.